Sarah, welcome to the Lifted podcast.
Thank you.
I'm very happy to have you. I'm excited for our conversation. I feel like it's something that I've wanted to talk about for a little bit. Let's get straight into it.
Let's do it.
So, your journey into becoming a young mom. Tell us about it. Tell us how you felt. Give us a little bit of a rundown.
Absolutely. A lot of emotions, all of the emotions. Being a young mom, it was something that I was prepared for and not prepared for. So I was excited. I was nervous. Your body is changing and you really have no idea what is about to come because there are no manuals. There are no classes that you can take to prepare you to become a parent. Like my husband and I took prenatal classes. And those are classes that are just given by like AHS. Anybody can go take them and they teach you like basic stuff. But babies don't come with a manual. So it was definitely a journey of learning as you go. And with one child, with our first, it became really fun once we got into like a routine and we kind of, learned how to do things and worked with like this little being who comes with his own personality and like all these different quirks and things as you kind of learn as you go. It was really, really lovely to see my husband become a dad, like a father. And that's a whole nother part of your relationship that you get to explore when you become a parent. He is like literally the best dad in the entire world. And I just like fell in love with him even more, which was really, really cool. And then that even extends past like your partner and your own immediate family to like seeing his parents become grandparents for the first time, because out of his siblings, we were the first one to have kids. My older sister had kids before I did. So my parents were already grandparents, but that's like really special to kind of see them step into like a new role.
They were probably so excited.
Oh my gosh, they're adorable. They're literally like the best grandparents ever, and they're just very involved and excited and just very proud, which was really, really cute to see.
Cute.
So, and it's fun, right? Because that's another way that like strengthens your relationship, because not everybody has a great relationship with their in-laws, and that was something that kind of, it takes the attention away from you and puts it on the kid. So,
oh my God, that's so true. It's like when a couple isn't doing well and they get a dog,
right.
And then it's like, it takes, not that like kind of relates, but like it takes the pressure off of like you guys fighting. And then it's like, oh, like now we have this thing to take care of,
yes. To work together towards, right?
Exactly. So it totally, I feel that. Okay.
Yeah, that was really helpful actually in my relationship with my in-laws to bring this like new life into the family. It was very exciting, and they're just like so like ooh, like over him. So that was really cute to see. I think that being a young mom was a whole nother story, because you have to sacrifice a lot as a parent. But I was in my 20s when I had kids, and so it was like my young 20s, and so
like early 20s.
Early 20s.
Oh shit. Okay.
And like I'll talk a little bit more about that in some of the later questions, because it ties into like why I had young kids. But I was very alone in my young motherhood, which was hard because all of my friends from high school were out getting master's degrees at this point and traveling the world and like partying it up and having fun. And I was at home learning how to breastfeed and like, just like disgusting with like poop and pee and all the things, like dealing with that as a young 20-year-old who should have been out like having fun and getting to know herself, and even getting to know myself in my own relationship. Because Kyle and I were only married 2 years before we started having kids. So it was a lot. It was a big change fairly quick. But we also had a lot of support. Like there's a lot of good and difficult that comes with becoming a parent. And I think with the first kid, we saw a lot of both of them, but it was easy because there was just one. And then the second one came, and it was just like a whole other ball game of emotions.
What was the difference?
You think that having one, you're like, okay, I've got this, I know what to do, but it doesn't matter because it's a whole nother human being. And so they also come with their own weird quirks and personality and preferences, even as young as babies. Like they're human beings, and they like things and they don't like things. And so my kids are literally night and day in every single way. So that was like, I know how to change a diaper. I know how to like feed the baby and do all those things, but it was learning all over again, a whole new human being. And that came with its own stresses. And now there's two of them and there's one of me, and like, it's a whole thing.
Well,
So,
yeah, and you probably get used to the first one and you're like,
yeah.
okay, now we're in routine. We understand. We get you. And then all of a sudden you have another one and you're like, oh shit, like,
Yeah.
now what?
Yeah, pretty much. You're like, I
Like,
have two in diapers and one's running around the house and one can't even move. And like, you're juggling a lot.
yeah,
So, yeah.
definitely. Wow, okay.
Yes.
You're like, it was a lot of emotions, okay?
It was all the emotions.
So-
Like,
and so when you were, you did say that you had postpartum with different symptoms,
Yes.
kind of.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I don't even know the symptoms if I'm being honest, but like, tell us some of your symptoms.
yeah. Okay, this is something I'm very passionate about talking about because even in our generation that is really good about talking about these things, postpartum depression and anxiety are still, not that they have a stigma, but it can still be really hard for women who have it to talk about it or to get the right help that they need or even understand that that's what they have. Because it's like a lottery. Like, it's not guaranteed that this person is more likely to get postpartum than another. And like when I say postpartum, like postpartum is the period post having a baby. And so that can be really lovely for people. Some people can get symptoms like postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. It just so happened that I got both after having my second. And it was something that I didn't realize I had because it did happen a little bit differently. So it presents differently in different women. It's not like here is like the manual of like what it looks like and that's that. And I kind of knew a little bit about it because people are a bit more open. I like had heard things. Even my mom, who when she had my younger sister, the nurse was like in the hospital, like, you might experience baby blues. And that was like the common phrase back then of like baby blues. But she was just like so sad and she didn't know why and like how to deal with it. So for me, my understanding was that it happened as soon as you had the baby because it's like postpartum, like post having the child. And that's not what happened. Mine happened, it started like presenting itself a couple months down the road. And some women get this like resentment towards their baby or they have like really dark thoughts and they don't bond with their baby. I didn't have that. And I feel like that's such a sad thing and hard thing to deal with. But that's one way that it presents. For me, it was that a couple months down the road, things just started becoming so heavy, so overwhelming. I started to become so triggered by like little things. Like I've always been a person who had her head on her shoulders and can handle a lot. Like I'm a busybody. I can multitask. I can do things and do them well. And it was like little day-to-day tasks became impossible. And so my body started to like shut down on itself when those triggers happened and things became overwhelming. And that would have been things like too much noise. So like both of the kids crying was a huge trigger. Clutter, which didn't used to bother me because I'm actually a naturally cluttered person because I'm creative. So I'll like leave trails kind of wherever I go. But I had to micromanage everything. Like if the house wasn't clean in the morning, it was like an automatic trigger. Like everything was overwhelming and I couldn't make breakfast and I couldn't go on with the day. So I had a lot of overstimulation, which is really common for moms, but it was to the point that it was giving me anxiety attacks. And I had never had an anxiety attack before. I didn't know what that was. So like,
oh shit.
Yeah, like it was like,
and this was after your second.
After my second. So I didn't have it with my first.
Yeah.
Like I snapped back pretty quick after.
So you're probably like, what is even going on?
Yeah, like why is life so hard?
So your first anxiety attack, do you remember it? Like, do you remember even like, I've never, I don't think I've ever really had a full anxiety attack.
Yeah.
Like what's it like?
I can't pinpoint the first time I had it.
Okay.
I think I was just in like newborn fog anyways.
Yeah.
But, have you ever seen the movie Inside Out?
Yes.
And the second one, Inside Out 2?
I haven't seen the second one.
Okay. I'm not going to give like any
watch
spoiler.
it now.
You really need to see it. It is honestly, it is the best movie where they like basically take a psychologist and put it into like child format that anybody can understand, like what the different emotions do and what happens in your brain. And it's so easy to understand. But there's this point in it where the main character is like going through puberty. So new emotions are introduced and one of them is anxiety. And this character is like unhinged and like crazy. But there's a part where the girl like has an anxiety attack and it shows what it feels like in her brain. And in the movie theater, I'm like literally getting goosebumps. I like just was like watching it, like never having felt so seen. Like I felt so seen because they explained what an anxiety feels like on the inside. On the outside, it can present itself as like shaky hands, or like your heart is pounding, or you're sweating, or like you can't talk properly, or people just like, sometimes it doesn't even show anything. Like people kind of sometimes will go blank, and it's like, hello, like snap out of it, or like you look fine, but inside it's so loud and like not working. And so what happens is anxiety is like trying to control like the panel board of like her brain, and she's like trying to handle all the things at once, and then it just gets so out of hand, and she goes faster and faster and faster, and it's just like this blur of orange, like the character is orange, and it's spinning and spinning, and on the inside at the control panel she's like twitching, and she like can't move, and she can't do anything. And the other character, Joy, comes in and like just like holds her, and she's like, hey, like you can calm down or whatever, and you see it kind of like slow down, but like anxiety literally can't control anything, and it's just racing and racing and racing in her brain while she's like twitching out and like can't move forward, can't get out of it. That's kind of what an anxiety attack feels like in your brain.
Yeah, I need to watch this.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
I've heard that everyone's talking about how it just like they explain the emotions so fucking well. Yes. And I felt that in the first one. Like I literally felt like the first one was really good. So like, okay. I
it's
need
like
to
next
watch
level.
It. Yeah, okay, got it.
It's really, really good. So that's kind of what it like felt like for me. Was it felt like my body was shutting down on itself, and I basically it would trigger me to a point where I couldn't handle things. And I should have been able to handle things, like even as little as like making dinner for that day, like thinking about having to like plan a meal was like devastating. And that's something so simple that it shouldn't be devastating. Like you should be able to make a meal and be okay with it. But I had these two little kids that had all these needs, and you know, they just were little children that couldn't communicate. And so they would use crying, or they would use touch or things. And by the end of the day, I would be so overstimulated, touched out, like my ears would be ringing, and just like that was the anxiety part of things, where I couldn't handle things and my body felt like it was shutting down on itself. And then there was the depression side of things. And that was really hard, because for me, it was like my inner voice or my inner critic became really like, it took over the driving seat, and basically was like the meanest. Like some of the things that I said to myself, I would never repeat to another human being. And it wasn't to the point where I was suicidal. Sometimes postpartum depression can put you in that place. But it was like I was convinced that my family would be better off without me. And I didn't know what that looked, oh, I'm going to cry. I didn't know what that looked like or what that meant, because I knew I still wanted to be alive. I knew that like I had value as like a person and a mom, but I felt like I was doing such a bad job by my kids that I was like psychologically damaging them, because I couldn't handle getting through a day without yelling at them, or feeling like I couldn't even make dinner. And it just was like, I just felt like I wanted to escape and just like not be part of the picture. Like
I actually feel that, because I feel like depression puts you in that place where you're like,
yeah.
And I was actually just talking to James about that today, was like, depression puts you in that place where like you already feel awful because you're getting so hard on yourself. You also have all this anxiety and stuff.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you now have shame for the way that you're treating other people, but you almost can't control it. And you're like, now I just feel absolutely awful.
Yeah.
So I feel like I can completely understand that. And it's like, yeah, it's not fucking easy.
No.
So.
No, it was really hard, because I'm like a tough critic on myself naturally. I was raised like in a religion that told you to be perfect, essentially. So I had high standards, and, you know, I grew up as a competitive dancer, and like I could do a lot of things that I was proud of. And then it got to the point where I'm like, wow, I'm like a 24-year-old with two little kids. All my friends from high school are like out partying, and I'm here having anxiety attacks, and I can't even make dinner, and I feel like shit about myself. And I like hated how I was as a mom, because I had all these expectations of like what I would be as a parent. You have these hopes and these dreams, and I was none of them. And so that voice pretty much took over for quite a long time. And it got to the point where my husband was like, something's off, like something is wrong, and I think you need help. And luckily he gently continued to remind me, like, I think you need help. I think you need help. Because I didn't know that I had postpartum depression and anxiety. I didn't know what it was. It wasn't that I immediately hated my baby. It wasn't that like it happened as soon as I gave birth. It was just like little by little. And then it kind of snowballed and got out of hand where Kyle was picking up everything. He would come home after a full day of work. He would clean the dishes. He would make the dinner. He would put the kids to bed. And I would just like hide in bed. And waking up was the hardest thing. I wouldn't want to leave the bed. Like I would like sleep in all the time. And Kyle would be like, I have to go to work. Like you need to get up and take care of the kids. And I would, but that was like, I would rather just be in bed and like shut out the world.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And you're not normally like that. Like
no.
That's not, yeah.
No, I like growing up, I was always like the social butterfly, very bubbly, very like I used to like perform on stage. Like being in front of people was never difficult. Handling things was never difficult. I had babysat my whole life. I thought like, oh, I can handle kids. I couldn't handle kids. Like
You're
it
like,
just
wait.
was like, it was not what I thought it would be.
So how did you actually find out that you had it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with Kyle's persistent encouragement of me to go find help, I started doing more research of like, what is wrong with me? Like, why is this happening? And very quickly it came up like, you might have postpartum depression. And I talked to my doctor. I was telling her what was happening. And she was like, yeah, you definitely have postpartum depression and anxiety. And so this is a good segue into like my journey with medication, because I grew up with a mom who's very health conscious, doesn't love Western medicine as much. Like, you know, there's a time and a place. But I was afraid to take medication because I had friends in the mental health space who had shared with me their experiences of what is it like to be on an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication. And, you know, it's like, well, you try one out and you see if it works for you, and it takes a couple weeks to build up to the point where it starts working. And then you find out if it works with your body, and if it doesn't, now you have to have a weaning period. And then you start that all over again, and you try it with the next medication, and then the next, until you find one that works for you. And I was like, well, shit, what if it's like months until I actually get the help that I need and I'm even worse? So I had this, I guess, prejudice or stigma against medication already going in. So I told Kyle, I was like, I'm going to try some things on my own. I want to try and see if going the natural route will help. So I started walking a bit more, started drinking more water, and like actually taking care of myself. And I looked up different like herbs and things that help with anxiety. So I took this one thing called St. John's wort, and like lots of people in the anxiety world know that herb, and like those things helped a little bit. Like I started to feel a little bit more like a normal person, but the anxiety and the mom rage and the mom guilt was still there. And so I finally went to my doctor, and I was like, okay, I tried all the things. They didn't really work. And she was really lovely, the doctor I had at the time. She was like, well, I understand that you're afraid of medication. What if we just try the smallest dose? She's like, I think I know one that will work well with you. And I was like, okay, I agreed. And she put me on like literally the smallest dose of an anti-anxiety medication. And it literally changed my life. It was just enough to get me over that hill, to get me out of the brain fog and like quiet that really mean voice inside my head, that it was easier to get up in the mornings, and it was easier to make dinner that day, and easier to recognize like kids are just being kids. Like they're not conspiring against you to make your life awful. They just don't know how to communicate, and like they cry, and that's normal. But before medication, I didn't feel normal, and it was so overwhelming. And so that was really incredible to have something that just like got me out of that headspace. Yeah.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, I feel that, because I feel like I would be scared, especially with, my sister went through a lot, and she had the same thing, was like, she would go on pills, and then it would cause like another side effect, and then like all this stuff. Yeah. And so I've just always been that person that's like kind of scared of it. Mm-hmm. So I would be the same as you. Yeah. But then going on to like a low dose or something, I'd be like, okay, like, you know, you'd probably have to convince me into it. Right. But like eventually I'd be like, okay, my life is like actually awful. Like I have to do something.
You have to try something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And here's the thing too, is so many moms are in that position where they maybe don't feel like themselves, or they're starting to feel the postpartum depression, or even they don't have it, but motherhood is just hard. And so they wonder, like, what can I do to get me to a better place, or something that will help me feel better? And a lot of them are afraid to try medication because there are side effects. You can have weight gain. You can have, like, if you're on high enough doses, you can get paranoia and like all these other awful side effects, right? You don't want that as a mom. But I've had people, because I am so open about like my journey, like I talk about it online. I've had multiple people reach out to me and be like, okay, you talked about how you went on medication. I'm like really scared of trying it. Can you walk me through it? And I have, and women have similar situations where they talk to their doctor. You have to advocate for yourself, right? Like tell them you're scared. Tell them I don't want to be on the highest dose and be like relying on this stuff. But you also have to be willing to try it out to see if it'll help you.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you know what else is scary is like you're also taking care of like 2 little kids, like 2 babies.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, if I get on this and I have bad side effects or something, like that's probably the scariest thing too, is like I still have to be there for these 2 kids. Like, you know, you don't want to have like crazy side effects or something happen or be constantly trying to, I feel like it just almost adds, like moms already have so much shit going on that it's like, it's almost hard to bring new things in.
Yeah, totally. You know? Yeah, it's like, you want to like ruin our perfect schedule here that we've worked so hard at.
You're like, I have a fucking routine, dude. Like, when am I going to take this pill?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like, when am I supposed to try this?
Yeah,
like,
totally. Or even just like getting to the doctor's appointment in the first place to talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to like haul 2 little kids out of their car seats and like into the office, and your toddler's like trying to touch everything, and your baby's crying, and you're like, I just need to see the doctor. Like, it's like,
you're like, SOS.
Seriously, can somebody please help me? And you're like eyes twitching. Yeah, pretty much. That is totally a part of it. It's like daunting just to even get there.
Yeah. I feel like this is a whole day trip, like a fucking field trip. Like,
totally.
So were there any other ways that it like impacted your life?
Yeah, it made it really difficult to like do anything, of course. I kind of touched on that, but it also, like, it is a mental health thing, but it really hurt my mental health and in my own like body image and things like that. So because the day was already hard enough, I didn't want to think about the basic things that I should have been doing, like literally getting dressed in the morning. I wore the same pair of sweatpants, I think, for like a whole year straight, like in a row. Like I would put on my pajamas to go to bed in the morning. I had the sweatpants there at the base of my bed. I'd pull them on and get ready for the day because I didn't want to have to think about it. It was just like, mom mode is on. You got to go make them breakfast. You got to go change their diapers, whatever. Like, and I wouldn't get ready unless I had to go out. Like, unless I had like an appointment or I had made plans or whatever. We're going over for a family dinner or something. I literally, like, I like burned those sweatpants after I was done my whole journey and was good. But like, that's where some people are at, is they can't even get dressed. They can't even, you know, like reply to a text that their friend sent them like a couple weeks ago because they read it and then their kid went and like broke something and they're like, oh shit, and like gotta go and like help them. You know, it's, motherhood is so hands-on that you forget that like you need your own hands to help yourself. And so it was hard to just like be a normal human being. You're
like, I'm just trying to like live. Let me wear my sweats for a year.
Yeah.
And it'll be fine. I think I'd probably do the same thing.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
Yeah. But it doesn't like help they were like gross old sweats, and that didn't help my image. Like I would look at myself in the mirror, and I had 2 babies, and like I have a really short torso, so my kids had nowhere to grow but out. Like literally it looked like I had a beach ball under my clothes. And like from behind, I'm a small person. So I had like my tiny legs and arms, and then I turned to the side to be like, whoa, like she's pregnant. Like, holy. So I stretched a lot. And so I had this like, coming from being a dancer my whole life and being like pretty fit to having 2 young kids and like not even recognizing myself in the mirror because I never did my makeup. I maybe brushed my hair. I would just wear like a baggy shirt and some sweatpants all day. And I would have like spit up on my shirt, and like food would be all over the house and on me. And it just was not a great look.
Yeah. So. And you're probably like looking back and being like, oh my God, like where did I go as a person? Like you're just here taking care of the kids at this point because you're like, oh my God, like
You lose yourself in motherhood at the beginning. For sure.
Well, and especially if you do have postpartum, because your mind is so not there. Like, I mean, I can't relate to postpartum, but like I have been depressed before, and like your mind, like it's almost like you're just trying to make it through the day.
Yeah.
but you just don't
Yeah.
like, yeah. And sometimes you don't even know that you're going through it until after. And then you're like, holy
Yeah.
shit, like, where did I go for like a couple months?
Yeah.
Like, what happened?
Right?
You
It's
know,
like
like,
the whole day goes by and you're still sitting in like the same spot with the same clothes and you're like, oh crap, it's like 5 o'clock. I gotta go do something. And yeah,
you're like, where did my mind go?
yeah,
Like, it's crazy.
it
Yeah.
is wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
you're like, I went through it.
Am I making you so excited to ever become a mom? Because you're probably like, oh my gosh.
I'm like, I'm going to have kids. It's fine.
It's no big deal. That can't happen to me.
No, I feel like everyone scares you out of it.
Oh yeah.
Everyone's
Yes.
like, oh my God, it was so awful. I'm like, great. It's so cool, you guys.
So looking forward to it.
Like, I'm so excited. But
Yeah.
then they're always like, oh my God, it was so awful. And then they're like, but it changed my life. And I'm like,
Oh yeah.
now I'm so confused.
But that's what it is. It's both. Like people talk a lot about the beauty of like growing up and becoming an adult is your ability to like have both and to live in the and of like, yes, life is hard and it's beautiful. Yes, it's like so cold outside and I'm sitting here with a cozy little blanket. It's like the ability to see both. It just becomes deeper. Like the highs and the lows become deeper as a parent. And so you have really hard days where you're like sleep deprived and the kid is like, maybe they're colicky and they won't stop crying. But then you have moments where it's almost euphoric how happy they make you because they're the most beautiful little thing that you've ever laid eyes on. Or they giggle for the first time and it is like magic to your ears, like baby laughs. Like if you're having a bad day, literally Google or like YouTube baby laughs. You can't be mad when you're listening to babies laughing because it's so stinking cute. And like the first time they walk or the first time that they say a word or like do something new, it's just magic all over again. So you still, yeah, it's freaking hard. It's also freaking magical. And like you get to experience the world through new eyes and you get to experience things all over again. Like now that my kids, like their first trick-or-treating, Halloween was like so fun again. Cause I grew up and I'm like, I don't trick-or-treat anymore. I'm an adult. Like we don't do that. But then when you see it through your kids' eyes, it like reminds you of how magical it was to do something for the first time. And that's really freaking cool.
That's actually so cool.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, oh my God. It makes sense why people are like, oh my God, like, it's awful and it's good.
Yeah.
It's so,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
because
both.
it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you are ex-Mormon.
I am.
A topic I really want to talk about.
Yeah.
How did that affect you being a young mom? Like, how did that affect your experience and just, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So many ways. It's a big reason why I was a young mom. So growing up in the LDS church or the Mormon church, as most people know it, family is like a very core principle, something that is like really important to them. They talk about family all the time. They have a phrase called families are forever. Like it's the basic unit of everything. And so as you grow up and as even from like a young age, you are it's very clear that gender roles play a big part in that church. And it becomes very clear what your role is quite early on. So the women have their own jobs, the men have their own jobs. And even as you're growing up as a girl in the church, they have different programs like when you're a youth, their youth program for the women is a lot about being a mom and preparing you for being a mom. They also have a very clear timeline that culturally is followed in the Mormon church. And so, for example, as a young teen graduating high school, it's very common that boys and girls go serve as a Mormon missionary for the church. So that's kind of post high school. And then once you come back from your mission, you go to school. If you don't serve a mission, you can just go to school right away. But then you get an education and you get married and you have kids. And that's just like that defining time in your life when people are young adults and they're coming into jobs, into life. Most people are doing like one at a time, like going and getting an education, going and getting a job, or going and traveling. You do it all at once in the Mormon church. It's like very common for people to get married young, have kids young. And so it was really normal for me to get married as a 20-year-old. And Kyle and I had met when he returned from his mission. And I was 18 when I met him. And we started dating and whatever. And Kyle and I actually dated for 2 years before we got married. And that's a really long time to date in the Mormon world.
Before you get married?
Uh-huh.
Whoa.
Like,
really?
Oh, yeah. I have multiple friends who got married within like months of like meeting their spouse.
Whoa.
Like it's like very common that people get married really quick, and there's reasons for that too.
Yes.
But it's also just very normal. Like that's not a weird thing in the Mormon church. And so I was actually like not common to have dated for that long. But I also I've never I was a very good standing member and I did all the things, but I wasn't like an extremist. Like I wasn't like yeah, so for me, I was always very open-minded growing up. I had a lot of friends outside of the church who dated people for long periods of time, and that to me felt way more normal and like proper, that you should like get to know a person and see them in different situations and experience a lot with them before you go into something as big as marriage. And so for me, like Kyle was ready to marry me at 19. Like it was the timeline. He had come back from his mission. He was a returned missionary, and the next step was to find a wife, start having kids. And so he was ready. Like that was just like what he was built up in his mind, what he was trained and conditioned to believe was like the normal timeline. And so he was ready to get married. Like, and I was only 19. We had only been dating for about a year at that point. And I'm like, I still live with my parents. Like, I've never moved out of my house. Like, you've just served a whole mission. You've moved out of your parents' house. You've experienced that. And I've always wanted to have roommates and like experience that. So I told him, not yet. I was like, no, I definitely want to marry you, but like, can we also just like experience a little bit longer? So we waited a whole nother year, and I was also going to school at Mount Royal. He was going to school down in the States at BYU, which is like the big Mormon church, Brigham Young University in Utah. And so we were doing long distance, and then I transferred schools. I kind of chased him down there. We dated for one more year, got married in the summer, had one more year of school, graduated, and came back to Canada. But it's very common that as you're going to school, people have kids as they're like finishing their degrees.
Oh my God, no, thank you.
All the time. Oh, it's so common down there. So like I moved down, and it's really concentrated in Utah. That's like the headquarters area of the church, right? So it's so common that there are people that have 1, 2, sometimes like 3 kids even before they graduate their programs. And it's really normal.
University is already hard enough.
Yeah. So like having kids young is very culturally normal and acceptable.
So wait, this mission.
Yeah.
What is that? Like, what do you do?
So a Mormon mission is like becoming a missionary for the church is where for guys, it's like a 2-year thing. And for girls, it's 18 months. And it's where you get called to go to another area of the world to serve the church as a representative of God. And the goal is to like convert people, essentially. Okay. Teach them about the gospel, about the church. They do lots of other things too. Like they do a lot of service work, and they do stuff for like the members of the church wherever they serve and stuff like that.
And like, does everyone have to do that?
No, but it's really common, especially for men. It's like much more expected of them to go. Women, it was like more optional, but it's also common. So it's like 2 years of your life.
Yeah.
So
it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Kyle served a mission in Colorado, like Denver.
Yeah.
And for 2 years.
Whoa.
For the church.
Denver's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'd go to Denver.
Oh, like
sure.
Like my brother was called to Scotland and Ireland.
Cool.
So you can go to really neat places and stuff. But yeah, that's just like that's a big part of the Mormon church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, okay. So I feel like because you had friends outside of the church.
Yeah.
That probably helped a lot. Like,
honestly,
just in a sense of, like, you guys not, like, getting married right away. Not that you shouldn't have, but, like, you know, you were like, wait, we need to, like, see other parts of each other before we're like, okay, let's just, like, put a ring on it.
Yeah. Well, I also didn't want to get married as, like, a teenager. Like, I know 20 is only 1 year later, but, like, the sound of it to me was kind of crazy. I was like...
You're like, wait, I have to be in my 20s at least.
Yeah. Yeah. So he was ready to go. And, like, I knew he was the person I was going to marry. And that wasn't a thing I ever doubted. Some people kind of rush into marriage for some reasons and some don't. But like Kyle is my person. And so getting married at 20 didn't seem crazy to me. But I had friends that like came to my wedding that were like, whoa, you know, it's just totally different compared to what is more natural in society outside of the church. But it affected how I became a mom for sure. Like I've been taught from a young age that is like my role as a woman. And in the church especially, it's like very clear. This is a me opinion. It's not like obviously what they say happens, but I think that motherhood is pushed onto women so much because it gives them a goal, it gives them something to work towards, and it keeps them busy. You know, like they have the children, it builds up the church, you know, like they love having lots of members and stuff to help run it and, you know, whatever. And I think it's one of those things that it's like they teach women that this is like your pretty much your only purpose and like only goal is to like become a mom. And it keeps them busy and distracted from the fact that the church is actually like very, there's a lot of gender inequality, and it keeps them busy and distracted from that fact and from them recognizing that like, well, what if that's not something that I actually want as a woman? There's so many women that struggle with infertility or that don't want to be a mom, but it's pushed on us from a very young age that that's just like your job. That's what you're meant to be. And so the activities are based around learning how to cook, how to babysit, how to like be a good wife, how to be a good mom. And those things are all great, but not everybody wants them, but you don't get to think that that's like an opinion you can have, you know? So that was a tough thing of like recognizing especially when I went through my postpartum of that, like, I don't even like this. And yet it was something that I just was expecting myself to do because I was told it my entire life. And I knew I always wanted to be a mom, and especially a parent with Kyle. I knew we would be good parents together, but I didn't realize how hard it would be. So then when I hated parts of it, I felt guilty. And I felt like, oh my gosh, am I offending God because I'm not fulfilling my role or my duty to him as a woman, as a wife and a mother? When I was still active in that church, it was like, well, shoot, I'm like failing everybody, you know? So
yeah, and I never thought about that. And because they teach you that when you're like 10 or something. Like, doesn't it? Yeah, it starts like very young.
Yeah.
And it's like if you're being taught something very young, you're being taught like the way you kind of have to live your life, I guess. You don't think another way. You're just like, well, this is what I have to do.
You have nothing else to compare to because that is your life. Yeah, that's your reality. And so most women grow up, become moms. Some of them love it and fulfill the role really well. Some of them hate it and are not great moms. And there are people out there that shouldn't have kids, or people that struggle to have kids, and it's not fair to them because, like, I have many friends that struggle with infertility, but because the culture is have kids, have babies, they go to church on Sunday and they're a married couple and they've been married for a few years and they haven't had kids yet. And people ask, when are you having kids? Or if you have a kid, when are you having another kid? How many kids do you guys want? And that's so normal to ask, but that can be a very private thing to be asking somebody. And like, you don't just go around telling people, oh, I struggle with infertility, or I can't even have kids, or I have miscarriages and I don't know why, you know, but then you go to church on Sunday and people remind you of that pain of like, this is your job and you can't do it. Like, that freaking sucks. So I really don't like that part of like how culturally acceptable it is to be like, when are you having kids? How many kids are you having? When's the next one coming? You know, it's like, don't ask people that.
No, honestly.
Like, yeah.
And you're right with like all of just everything. Like, so many people can't have kids. They don't want to be reminded. They've probably been trying for years. Yeah. You know, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's just a huge part of the culture. It's something that I had kids young and that was normal, but it didn't make it any easier. And it was probably actually something that made it even harder. And I didn't recognize that until later, until, you know, Kyle and I gave that space between us and the church. And eventually when we left, I reflected on a lot of my motherhood journey and how it related to Mormonism. And so much of it is influenced by even the fact of having like a community. So people can have lots of kids and can have them young because the church has your back and they have activities for your kids to go to, and you automatically have all the youth girls who want to be your babysitters. And like, there's a lot of lovely parts about it that I think are great. But when we left, that was a scary thing as a mom to be like, oh shoot, who's our tribe? Because I was the only one having kids out of my friend circle at the time. No, none of my friends were even married. And so it was like, it was scary to leave because I'm like, well, what does that mean for me as a mom? And how am I going to teach my kids all of these good things and good standards without the church? And obviously we'll figure it out and, like they'll be fine. But at the beginning, it was something that was terrifying because I'm like, this was my village. This was my community. And now that's gone. So what does that mean for me as a mom? Like,
yeah, no, it was probably so isolating because you're like, yeah, you're right. Your friends aren't having kids.
Yeah.
They're not even married.
No.
Like, yes, you can relate to them in some sense,
Yeah.
but at the same time, there's probably a lot of stuff that you're like, you guys would never get that because you don't have kids. Like,
Yeah.
you don't understand that I can like never go out until I get a babysitter or
Yeah.
whatever it is,
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't relate to, well, you can relate to them, but like in different senses. Also, having a community when you're going through something like that, or you're like, leaving it after they've promised all this stuff, not that they've promised it, but
Yeah.
and it's like, that's terrifying because you're like, now I am we're doing this on our own. Not that you couldn't do it, but obviously at first you're like, holy shit, like this is crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
and I just thought of like going through postpartum with George was a whole nother thing in the church too, because that actually was hard. Even though I like had that community at my fingertips, it didn't feel that way. So a big part of my postpartum journey related to the church, I guess, after having my second was he like had his nap time during church hours. And so it was one of those things where when you have a nap schedule, you do not veer from the nap schedule. Like you don't mess up the nap schedule. It is holy and like you stick to it and you don't mess it up because you've tried so hard to like get this kid to sleep and like take their naps. And so I would stay home with George and he would sleep and Kyle would take Jack, our older one, to church. And that was kind of the beginning of distance, like having a bit of distance between me and the church, not constantly being on the hamster wheel of always going every Sunday and doing all the things. And during that time when everything was so dark for me, I actually had the opposite of feeling so alone and not feeling like I had a community at all, because it was like, well, where's the help? I'm a good member. I'm doing all the things. I'm checking all the boxes. I go every Sunday and I'm like a good person. And we're taught that if you like do all the things and check all the boxes that you'll get blessings from God. And I felt complete abandonment because it was like, well, why am I going through this really difficult thing and yet I'm doing as good as I can and I'm practically begging on my knees for help and there's no help. So I felt completely cut off from like the community they talk about and, like kind of chalk up to being so amazing. And it can be for people. It absolutely can. But it wasn't for me. So that was really hard and like confusing in my head of like, well, what the heck does this mean now? It's like I'm already going through postpartum and now I'm like considering like what does the church mean in my life now too, on top of being a parent. And
you're like, now I'm confused about everything. Yeah. Like, what am I actually doing?
Yeah, pretty much.
It was probably just a confusing time with like, okay, giving yourself some space to like something that you've been in since you were born, right? Like you were in that since you were born.
I was born into the church, yeah.
So then it's like, okay, well, this has been like a huge part of my life for what, like 20 years. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, I don't even feel community right now, which I'm sure a lot of people do, but obviously you didn't.
Yeah.
And so that would just feel like complete abandonment, isolation. You're just like, what the fuck is going on? Like, what is happening?
Yeah, it's very common to, like, it is difficult to be a member as a young family because you're going to church on Sundays trying to feel spiritually uplifted by the lessons that they're giving and whatever, but you have this toddler who you're like trying to keep quiet and a baby who you need to like leave to breastfeed or like change their diaper half of the time and you're not getting anything out of the meetings. Like it's just like it feels like it added to my anxiety. Actually, Sundays were awful for me because you have to get your family ready to go in their Sunday best, and then you go to church and you have to remember all the snacks and all the toys that'll distract your toddler so that they're quiet so everybody else doesn't, everybody else can listen to the lesson and whatever. And it just was like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we here putting ourselves through this? And that's actually something that they use as like encouragement to keep going of like, moms have been doing it for years. They have all been through this and they all make it on the other end even stronger. And whatever. It's like, you can totally spin anything to be like such a good thing. It was not a good thing for me.
You're like, I'm not enjoying this. What are we doing?
Yeah.
My mom actually said that like I guess I don't really remember this, but when I was really young and my sister was really young, she's like, there was a period of time where we just didn't take you guys anywhere aside from daycare
Yeah.
Probably that reason.
Good
She's
for
like,
her.
why would I?
Yes.
Why would I take you to a restaurant where you guys are just going to
Ugh.
run around and be annoying?
Yes.
Why would I do that?
And
Let's
make me
just
a
get
hot,
takeout. Yeah.
hot mess
Honestly.
express. Like,
She's like, it's not even worth it. Like,
Yeah.
why would you do that?
Yeah.
And they're not getting anything out
No.
of it. Like, they're
No.
there playing with their toys. They could be doing that at home. You're like, what are we doing? Why are we here?
but it's
Like,
not taught that way. It's like, no, you need to get them into the routine of it now, of like, of getting them used to like sitting for this long and for whatever, so that, you know, when they're older, it's like they just sit and they listen and, you know.
And
So
you're like, no, you guys, no, I'm not doing that.
it was honestly so lovely, like with our family when we did decide to leave, of we had a whole nother Saturday is what it felt like was, and it's one of those things where like we were still honoring the Sabbath in a way of like we were spending time together as a family and we were doing things that we loved and we weren't stressed out of our minds. It just became like a true day of rest for me. Because that's what they say. It's like the Sabbath day is a day of rest. And so you should be going to church and then spending the rest of the day with your family.
And that's the Sunday.
Sundays, yeah. And that's really common in a lot of religions is the Sabbath day is the day of the Lord and you rest and you prepare for the week ahead and whatever. And so it did not feel like a day of rest. It was like my worst day ever. And I hated Sundays for a long time. And I'm sure if we were still going today that like we would have grown out of that by now. But it just wasn't something that we wanted to continue. So
yeah, which is fine. So being a young mom, I know we have a lot of young moms listening in the group. What advice would you give them?
Ooh, I have a couple really good points. Here's the thing is like when you're a young mom, you're in the thick of it and it's really difficult. Sometimes it's really hard to hear advice. So the simplest things I could give to a mom who is in her hot mess express era of like, the sleepless nights and the screaming toddler and whatever. I would say this. I would say do one thing to take care of yourself. Just one thing. For me, it could have been getting dressed and not putting on those sweatpants every single day. Or, like brushing your teeth or watching a show that you love. Like just literally pick one thing because that is doable even when you are going through something really difficult. And if it's too daunting and you're not able to do one thing, I would say be willing to get the help or make it into like schedule it in. Like if it's something that you just like don't think you can do, put it in your calendar, put reminders to go out and like do things. Like get yourself into a different environment or a different outfit or talk to somebody that is different than your everyday I'm with the kids and I wear the same outfit, because that'll help your mental health so much, even with something so little. So do one thing for yourself a day if you can. I would also say that like don't be afraid to ask for help and to receive help, because we can't do everything by ourselves. The way that our society is built is for the individual. Capitalism and consumerism is so that everybody has their own house and their own microwave and their own, everything. We're not meant to live that way. As humans, we are supposed to have a tribe, and that can be really hard for moms to find. Sometimes we don't have a group of friends that are also all having babies at the same time. I didn't have that. And so it would have been really nice to like have somebody to lean on or to ask for help. So if somebody's offering help, and maybe if it's not the help that you want, you could suggest something different or just say yes, like just let them bring over the frozen meal, let them clean your house, even though it's disgusting and you're embarrassed for them to do that. Accept the help. And if it means help with like medication, don't be afraid of medication. And if you are, try different things. Maybe try asking for the lowest dose. Like it's a matter of just like putting in a little bit of effort that can make the biggest difference. And just like don't be so hard on yourself. Everything is like nothing lasts forever. That's the beautiful thing, and it's bittersweet. Is like nothing lasts forever. You're not gonna have those baby snuggles forever, but also you're not gonna have a baby forever that's screaming and crying and pooping and puking and whatever. Like everything is a phase of life, and so it might be really hard to hear when you're in the thick of it of like, I'm a newborn mom and it feels like it's never going to end, that you can never get out of that phase. But now being a little bit ahead, I'm out of the toddler phase. I'm out of the newborn phase as a mom. My kids are both in full-time school. I literally feel like a new woman. Like I'm like an individual again because I have 6 hours during the day where I can do what I want. And I can go work out and I can go do something Sarah wants to do as Sarah and not mom. And so that just comes with time. And the sooner you can recognize that it's just a phase and accept that, the easier time you're going to have. Because it's going to change. It's always changing. And so just remember, like, it's just a phase. It's really hard right now, but it's just a phase. And it's going to change. And they're going to become a little bit more independent. And you're going to get a little bit more time for yourself. And you're going to feel like you again. And that's like, you have something to look forward to.
I feel like that's so helpful.
Yeah, good.
Like, yeah,
I hope so.
Genuinely. I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I could even use that. I'm like, cool.
Yeah, you can apply that to literally anybody, any phase of life. Is like, just remember, it's just a phase. Like, it's not going to last forever.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you have like a life sentence in jail. I don't know what you did to get there, but like, it's just a phase.
It's literally just a phase.
Yeah.
They won't be a baby forever.
They won't. And take all the pictures, have all the snuggles, enjoy the parts that you can. But also remember, all the hard shit is just it's gonna be different, but you'll get out of it. Yeah.
Sarah, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's been such a good time.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that we were able to talk about that. I will put her social media in the description. And yeah, thank you guys for listening. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.